Hello there, sword friends. Today I'm going to tell you about a special sword. This is a custom Evolution Blades Motohara that is all known to me from dojo mate and sword friend John. And let me unpack that a little bit. Evolution Blades is the company. They're linked in the description down below. Motohara is the series. This is a custom variety that was made to sword friend John's specifications. Those specifications and features, I guess, if you want to get something similar, are also listed in the description down below. And anyway, before I get into it, there are some things that you should note about the sword. So first, the cost. This is about a $6,500 project, which is not insubstantial, and that's one of the reasons I was actually interested in looking at it, because typically Evolution Blades are around 3,000, maybe 5,000 fully loaded. So what happens if you turn up all the sliders on the sword? You spend about as much money as you can with Evolution Blades. I'm sure you could actually spend more, but if you're getting on the really high-end side of Evolution Blades, what do you get for that money? Sword friend John can help me answer that question. So again, special thanks to him. But other things you should know: one, this is not a safe queen. Sword friend John has used it. It has been used on many Japanese tatami mats, and therefore it is not representative of one that you would buy new. So if you see signs of handling, if you see scratches from cutting, keep in mind that's par for the course for any sword that's actually out there in actual practice and getting used. And you likely would not see them if you were to buy one new. The other bit to know is that I'm not an expert in this stuff. So I've talked about Japanese swords on the internet for quite a while. You might say I have a bit of first-hand experience, but I don't fancy myself an expert out there. And just keep that in mind as you hear my musings and ramblings about this sword in particular. So plan for the video here is to talk about the bits and bobs, fits and features. I'll go over all the little things that I see on the sword, and hopefully it is helpful to get some idea of the build quality and what you get if you spend this kind of money with Evolution Blades. The other bit is I'll talk about using it as a practitioner from an Iaido perspective as well as cutting. So it's worth noting that I haven't spent a fair amount of time with this sword. This is sword friend John's sword. I'm going to return it back to him in relatively short order, but I did get to do a little bit of practice with it, and I have gotten to see him practice with it, and he's given me his thoughts. I have gotten to cut with it. I've also seen him cut with it a fair amount. So I have a reasonable feeling for the sword, but not as much as I typically do when I perform a review. However, it's very expensive, and I would like to return it graciously to my dojo mate. So this one is expedited a little bit, but I still feel like I can talk about it, muse about it a little bit as a practitioner and how it performs cutting. Then I will talk about if I think it's worth it or not. I might compare and contrast it a little bit to the evolution that has happened from the Evolution Blades that I own personally and use, and what is sword friend John has here, which is much newer and certainly much higher end than the units that I use. Anyway, that's what's in store for the video. Hopefully you find it helpful, and on with the reviewing. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the kasha, the end cap right here, and the first thing I should mention here is that it's made out of a mokume, and I'm not sure exactly what the mixture is. If I have it, I'll link it in the description or put it in the description down below, but predominantly it's a silver color, and it has very deep contrasted black in it as well. So it's smooth. I don't make out any texture from the mokume, but there is like a dominantly silver view and then black texture, which you can clearly make out from a distance. And the kasha is made of it, the fuchi is made of it, the seppa is made of it, and then the foil on the chupi sabaki, which you'll see later, is also made of it. And so there's some custom fittings on here, which are not typically things I see on Evolution Blades, but obviously they can do it, and they can do it at a pretty high level here. So apart from the mokume, it's worth noting that there's a slight ledge here, so it's got a little bit of a definition and texture. You're not seeing a lot. There's not a lot of carving in here. The texture is really what's bringing kind of the visuals to it, or the material that it's made from, but there is some ledges and stuff in here, some other things that provide dimension. And then from a practitioner standpoint, this just feels excellent. The design of this kasha is really, really well done. It feels very solid in the hand, and these kind of little round nubs on here don't butt into the flub of my hand. They don't hurt. So if I'm using this, if I'm practicing with it for a time, nothing about it is particularly uncomfortable. It's all very ergonomic and also really quite nice looking. There's no shirodome on here, something that I commonly don't see on some higher end Fuchi kasha that are custom made. Sometimes they're put in here, sometimes they're not. In this particular case, they are not. And the way the Fuchi transitions to the Ito is excellent. There's no overlap. There's nothing here that shouldn't be. It is exceptionally well done. And that kind of is bringing us down to the ska, the handle, this bit right here. And so apart from the transitions, the next thing I look at is the knots. And one, I'm going to be kind of, well, more pedantic, more anal retentive about this sword than I am typically, because it's $6,500. And so what I don't want to see here are big bulbous knots sticking out. And I don't. They are almost just in line with the rest of the knots on the sword, and they are rock solid. And so one thing that I'm looking for in the tightness of Ito generally is I feel like I should be able to stand on any part of this, put my entire body weight on it, and have it not move. And for the most part, that's what happens. So I can, in some places, kind of move it just a little bit with a fair amount of pressure. But generally speaking, if I get my hand down there, I can't displace these knots, and I feel like I could put my whole weight on it and my thumb would rip off before the knot would. And so excellent tightness on here, something that is often overlooked. And apart from Evolution blades, Citadel has made tight Ito and Evolution blades. In terms of companies out there, there's obviously custom people that do it, and you get into a different conversation then. But in terms of companies, you can go buy a sword from today that have Ito that is at this tightness. I've seen Evolution blades and I've seen Citadel, and that's that's it. Other people make tight Ito, which is good and also nice and acceptable for the money. But in terms of I could put my whole dumb fat body on here and have it not move, those are the two companies out there that I think can do a job like that. And so it's excellent to see here. It's exactly what you'd hope for, and it's what you're getting. Anyway, moving on from here, the shape of the handle, really nice. It has a little bit of wasting to it, but not too much that it looks gaudy. And all of the kind of leather where it's lining up is flat and even. The leather as well has a little bit of tackiness to it. Not a lot. It's not like it's sticky or gooey feeling. But as soon as you grab onto it, the shape of the handle kind of has a slight kind of teardrop shape around the edge, which rests in your fingers. You immediately know where the edge is, and the leather is kind of supple enough to just grab into your skin, and it doesn't want to move around. So if I hold on to it, it's not going anywhere. I can't turn it in my hand, and I instantly know where the edge is. It indexes exceptionally well, and it also stays put. And that tight Ito is something I harp on quite a bit as a practitioner. If you feel this loosey-goosey feeling, it impacts your ability to feel in control of the weapon. You have to really tighten down on it, and then you get tired while you're practicing easier. So this tightness, how it feels, the material chosen, all excellent if you're trying to use this for practice. Or if you just want a nice sword, this is kind of the way it's supposed to be. It's just delightful to see it done the way that it's supposed to be. Anyway, moving on, the Samegawa here has an emperor note. It's really high-end skin, and it has some kind of etching in here. So there's a material that's been put on the Samegawa and then washed off, and it's left this kind of brown residue in the grooves of the Samegawa, which accentuates the nodules and makes them look big. So you can see, hey, I spent a fair amount of money on the skin. It's aged in such a way where it really pops out prominently, and you can see how large the nodules are on the skin. The diamonds as well are all reasonably well shaped. They're not too big, not too small. They are consistent and even in the right spots. The Minuki, I'm not sure what these are. I believe they're cast kind of reproduction pieces, but they are cast of a very nice quality. I can make out little scales on the dragon, for example. So it's all really detailed and really well done. It's also worth noting that the Minuki don't stand proud on the surface. So they are rested in there in such a way where if I grab the handle, I'm not feeling a big bulbous Minuki, and it rests on the scabbard or rests on the handle in such a way where it doesn't stand out and impact your ability to grip the sword. Since your fingers are going here, you wouldn't really know that they were there unless you looked. This sword also has two Mikugi, and that's the little peg that goes through the handle. Typically I see one on Evolution blades. This one happens to have two. And one thing I typically forget to mention in reviews if it's present, but is present here, is they are set in at an angle. So what that means is that if they're set in at an angle, then it allows some pressure. It allows to kind of push the handle in and tighten things down versus just being horizontally pressed through. These are pressed in, and they're also not just, they don't look like they were just drilled through. So all the little edges and corners have been addressed. It's not messy at all. Every attempt to make this look presentable, nice, and elegant seems to have been done. Anyway, shape-wise, texture-wise, fit-wise, all of this is really, really comfortable. At this point in the review, I've not had the handle off, so worth noting I will eventually take it off, but I haven't just yet. I imagine these Mikugi are going to come out reasonably well, and this handle will come off like it's supposed to, because that's typically how it works with Evolution blades, because I can take them out to disassemble them and clean them. The Fuchi right here, made of the same Mokume, it doesn't have the same texture, the same little ridge on it. So I would have liked to see a little ridge on here. I imagine this is the design, so I'm not complaining, but to me it would have been nice to have the same little ridge on the Fuchi right here that is on the Kashira, just to have it thematically come in and give it a little bit more dimension. But the Mokume pattern here is very, very bold. It stands out. I can see it from, even far away. It absolutely grabs my eye, and it's also fit on here excellently. It doesn't have any translation, any ledge. It's put on exactly as it should be. The Mokume seppa are there, but you can't necessarily see the details. So there's a fair amount of effort that went into the seppa, and all you can kind of see are the little teeth sticking out on one side. But they are custom Mokume seppa. That's also a really nice thing to see. It stands out a little bit more on the Habaki side, but they do have custom seppa. That's not an inexpensive thing to do, especially since half of it is covered up, but the detail on the custom seppa is there and appreciated by me anyway. Now the Tsuba has a more or less like a Tsukashi kind of cutout iron look to it that's done in this spiral pattern that looks like a tsunami, like a tornado or something like that, but a really cool shape, not something that I've seen before, so much appreciated here. And then it has this kind of silver raised rim, and that rim, or the silver rim that's put on it, absolutely kind of keeps my eye with all the other silver bling that's on here. I think it ties things in really, really well, the black and silver. And the iron part of the tsuba also has kind of texture to it, so it looks like it's been rusted and then stabilized, and it's black. None of that comes off on my fingers either, but it has just a little bit of texture to it as well on the surface. Anyway, I would have not minded seeing like a little extra kind of dimension in the tsuba, like maybe thicker at the center or something. It's not a problem, and it's not ahistoric or anything either, but when you're spending this kind of money, like, I want to see dimension and texture everywhere, so thickened at the center and then kind of tapering out at the edge would have been, again, something that I just don't see very often. It might have been kind of nice here. The tsuba has developed a little bit of wiggle here, and so that's something that I said to Sword Friend John I could sort out for him. Worth noting that this is not a thing that I at all hold against Evolution Blades. Sword Friend John, as I mentioned, does not use this as a safe queen. It goes out and it smacks tatami mat. Sword Friend John is learning. He's thrown some bad cuts this sword's way. It's still straight, but a little bit of tsuba wiggle is not an uncommon thing to happen. And all that needs to be done is, taking a nail set, tighten up some things around here. It'll go back on and be right and tight. But this is a very common maintenance item that needs to be addressed with Japanese swords that are used. So I'm not surprised at all, and I don't hold it against Evolution Blades as like some kind of fault at all. Anyway, easily, a thing that happens and reasonably easily remedied. I have to take this off. There's a whole spiel about it, but basically it's something that can be done, and something that if you're going to use your swords and this bothers you, something you'll want to learn to rectify. At the same time, some people kind of like it. If I'm practicing Katori Shinto Ryu, there's this little noto where you turn the blade around and kind of shake it, and that little tsuba rattle is kind of indicative of doing it well. So it can also be a training aid, just worth noting that, but rattling around sometimes can irritate people. Moving on to the Habaki. So there's a two-piece Habaki here, and this is the only spot that has a notable flaw that Sword Friend John called out. And so more or less the foil on the bottom part of the two-piece Habaki that has the Mokume on it on one side, a little flap of the kind of foiling or whatever part has gone over this this piece is coming out. And so, or not coming out, but has folded over and provided a little bit of an eyesore. And I think, if I'm speculating, that this foil could pretty easily be overlooked by people really intent on good QC. If there was a little flap that was stuck over, then as it's drawn and sheathed, it gets progressively worse. And even if it's kind of sitting and just kind of gently rattling and moving around, that kind of foil can be grabbing on the wood a little bit and flapping around and gradually getting worse. So to the point that when Sword Friend John opens it, he sees it and is like, hey, that's problematic. Now, worth calling out that this flaw was, I believe, noticed by Sword Friend John. He reached out to Jason, the owner and proprietor of Evolution Blades, who committed to solving it, to replacing it, to getting it taken care of. And so Sword Friend John hasn't sent this sword out, but Sword Friend Jason absolutely provided excellent customer service, which seems par for the course from Evolution Blades. Again, something you'd hope for when you're spending this kind of money. Just great to hear that you're getting it. But you could send this out and get it fixed, and it sounds like that can be taken care of. So nobody's got hurt feelings about it. But at the same time, also worth noting that if you're spending a bunch of money, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get perfect out of the gate. Things happen, but at least Evolution Blades has demonstrated that they're there to take care of it. It's just kind of, when you think sometimes you're spending this kind of money, you'd rather not have to deal with sending it back. It's kind of an inconvenience and a problem, so it's a bummer that it happened. At the same time, things happen, and I'm glad that what I do here is consistently Jason at Evolution Blades is always got the customer in mind and willing to kind of help out and take care of things. You'd expect that he would, but it wouldn't be surprising to you either if somebody was like, oh, you didn't like it? Well, you probably did it. Go pound sand. That's it's not something that I hear Sword Friend Jason at Evolution Blades ever doing. That's good. At the same time, it'd be great if, perfection could be delivered. So maybe in the future. Anyway, the two-piece Habaki, it's worth noting, apart from that little flaw, it's beautiful. So it has Mokume on the bottom part, and then this Rokushode copper that has these little crystalline structures in it that I've really only seen Josiah Boomershine ever make before. But it has this beautiful, deep Rokusho patina'd on it that's glossy, and then it has these little crystal structures that are visible in the surface of the copper on here. You don't normally think of copper as having much to look at, but this one does. There's some cool stuff metallurgically in it. I really like to see it. It's a pretty looking surface. And again, the orange that ties in from the Sageo, this little etching in the Samegawa skin, and then here, all like tie together a little bit and kind of keep my eye from having it look weird with these different metals. I generally would go all silver, but I don't actually mind the mixture of metals in here. It has I like it. It's growing on me, I guess I should say. It's something I thought would irritate me, but I've actually come to like it a little bit as I've gotten to hang on to this sword a bit. Apart from that, other things about the Habaki are also excellent. It has these little feet on the back. It is tapered in such a way that's nice. It touches the sword where it's supposed to, doesn't where it isn't. And then it has excellent tension here in the saya. It doesn't fall out, and despite being used quite a bit for training, it's still excellent, still fits really well. Anyway, that's going to bring us to the scabbard, which has a ton to unpack on it as well. So first, transitions here are really well done. If I shake it, it doesn't rattle at all. It will rattle a little bit, but most of that is actually the tsuba. The scabbard itself doesn't have any rattle whatsoever in it. So I'm going to start with the koiguchi, this mouth area up here. So first, it's properly formed. If you look at it from the mouth perspective, it looks like it's the hard version to make. They didn't cheap out on anything. Again, you wouldn't expect that to be. I haven't seen an evolution blades with a kind of hodgepodgey koiguchi area. They're always well formed. This one is a little larger than I'm used to seeing. That's great. This is a thing that can crack if it's dropped, if it's used, if you're poking at it, if you're bad with your no-toe, it gets scratched and easily broken. This is a little bit more oversized, a little bit more meat on the bone, probably going to be harder to crack. One of the things that I'm noticing about evolution blades is just a little bit more meat, but not so much that it looks weird. Anyway, the way it transitions to the samegawa is excellent. The samegawa is kind of this dull gray, opaque kind of looking color. It reminds me a little bit of some of the colors shibuichi can be, which is like a mixture of copper and silver, I believe, that's patinated in a way. Anyway, I believe this was supposed to be a slightly different green. It came out this way. I happen to really like this color, though. It's very, very handsome. The way it's lined up as well, the seam, you can't feel it at all. And it's been sanded down and lacquered so that the nodules are all kind of accentuated. It also has this kind of snakeskin feel to it. So you can make out some of the texture on the samegawa underneath here. Not so much that it's just one surface of gloss, but you can kind of make out that there's a natural skin under there. Beautifully done. The kurigata as well also looks like it's floating on here. Sometimes the transitions between samegawa and kurigata aren't really well done. This is beautifully done. It fits on there really well. I don't make out any seams or imperfections. Again, it looks like it's just like floating there. There are silver shirodome in here, which are fit in and don't move. I don't know if they're glued or not, but they're not so small that the sageo can't fit through or frays or get scratched when you move it around in here, which is, again, much appreciated from a practitioner standpoint. A lot of times they're made too small to actually put a sageo in and have it move around, or you put them in and there's little bits on there that pull it and pull the fibers out of your sageo, so you are hesitant to ever invest in a nice one. This one is beautifully done and the right size. Talking about the sageo briefly, this is a sageo from swordstore.com. Sword Store makes also excellent swords. I have not had one, but I've seen some photos and I am an admirer, you might say. Anyway, this is one of their hand-woven sageo, and this has like a turtle shell motif on it. This is done in the gold and brown, and I think this was an excellent choice. There was a black and green one that you might think would work well, but the green would be a different color and it would look just a little bit off. The kind of gold-brown ties in again with some of the other copperish colors that are on here, and I think was a really wise choice from a thematic standpoint. It looks really handsome. Anyway, the weave on here is just a little different. It's like $150 for this sageo and was factored in the price of the sword that I listed below. And it's got a link to it on there if you're interested as well. But a really, really nice high-end sageo. It has a weave that I'm unfamiliar with, kind of a pattern on it that I'm unfamiliar with. And it also feels good. It doesn't feel like super hard in the hand. It's not like crunchy or crusty. It's delicate and smooth, but also feels really solid and hasn't frayed anywhere. This is an extra detail that isn't part of the evolution blades, but is absolutely a nice little extra detail here, and one that I appreciate. And if you're interested, it's linked down below. Anyway, as I move down from the samegawa spot, well, actually, before I move down from the samegawa spot, I do want to note that this offers some additional protection if you are using it as a practitioner. So if you draw the sword and then try to pull it out too quickly, it's possible that you will cut through the scabbard and into the meat of your hands. And this samegawa wrap up here provides an extra bit of, well, protection between your digits and the blade. And so sometimes swords get cut, the scabbards get cut through. This samegawa is really hard to cut through. It's like rawhide. So before you split your scabbard, you're likely to cut into that and probably not make it all the way through, or have an opportunity to notice it and repair it before you continue on with your practice. And so I appreciate having this kind of protection on the scabbard. It's one thing that I like. I like rattan, I like samegawa, I like a metal wrap, something there to protect me from me. And this is on here. I happen to like it. It also looks excellent. Anyway, now moving down from the Semigawa, there is a little silver rim here, and this is not something that I've seen before. This little silver washer rim, I'm not sure what's on here, just provides a little transition between the Semigawa section and some of the fraying, or something that might be on here, and the spiral section down here. I think it adds an excellent little bit of detail. It's something I would like to do on swords in the future. Happen to really like this little silver fitting that's done here. Now I'm going to move on to this section, the bottom third of the scabbard. And first, texture-wise or thickness-wise, it tapers down a little bit, something I've seen consistently on Evolution blades. It has a really nice little extra thick kojiri at the end here, which is this end cap. Gonna likely not fall apart or get dinged or banged up, or, well, it absolutely could, but it's thicker and so probably not going to crack and fall off real easy. The elephant in the room, though, is this spiral stuff, and it is excellent. There's a little bit of a gripe that I would have with it, but I do want to point out that, one, this saya tapers down and has dimension to it, and you wouldn't notice it from the spiral. It's even to the eye, so I don't know what magic had to be done to make it all look even on a changing shape scabbard, but it was done in such a way that I can't pick out where any kind of pattern or changes. It is expertly done, has very even grinds and grooves, and it to the eye just looks like it's seamless, even though it can't be because it's on some taper, and the thickness of the scabbard is changing, but the thickness of the lines aren't, and neither is the pattern. Anyway, just beautifully done, expertly crafted. It's absolutely lovely to behold. It has a wonderful texture on the hand, and as I grow over the surfaces, none of them are lumpy or groovy, none of them are asymmetrical. It's really, really excellently done. Where I take issue is inside the groove. There's a little bit of paint that's catching, or lacquer that's catching on some of the dust or speckles or non-sanded parts of the lacquer. So inside these grooves, somebody didn't take like a bunch of extra time probably to sand out each one, to dust them out. And I've done projects with grooves on them that got lacquer or paint in them, and they were always smooth and nice, and I didn't notice these little speckles on the lacquer. And so this is irritating and an imperfection, and something I think Evolution blades could absolutely improve on. Admittedly, there is an absolute ton of grooves here that would need to be hand sanded, cleaned out, and done. So I imagine it's an enormous amount of time, but this is a substantial amount of money. And so seeing these little kind of speckles in here is disappointing. I'm not sure where to gauge this, though, because again, in the swords that I've done, which have been simpler than this, I haven't seen it, but I acknowledge that this must be like an enormous amount of work to clean up every little groove here to prevent all the little dust that would gather on the lacquer. But if you're being really pedantic and anal retentive, you can absolutely see it when you hold it up to some of the lights. It catches, and it's noticeable. Not easily, but to somebody like me, maybe somebody like you, it could be. So to wrap things up on the scabbard, it draws and sheathes really well. It doesn't rattle, and it's worth noting that it goes in and out of here like it's on rails. It's wonderfully done, and apart from the little snafu with some of the bits on the lacquer, I think it's absolutely wonderful. All right, now I'm going to talk about the blade, the pointy stabby part, and there's a fair amount to unpack here. So first, we have a O-kissaki style blade. This O-kissaki is the tip on it. It's quite large. Measurements are in the description down below. It has a very kind of prominent transition as well. So I wouldn't say that it is geometric in the kissaki shape, but the transition to where that O-kissaki starts certainly is. It has bohi that are terminated really well on either side. You can make out that they don't kind of peter off. They have a lovely transition to them. Polish-wise, it's mirror on the spine and in the bohi. It has a slight opaqueness to the kind of bevel area here, and then it's got some polish that denotates the kissaki area here, where it's not just extra tool marks going the other way, but is polished in such a way that it goes the different direction and stands out when you bring it out in the light. It has a really imposing, cool look to it. Anyway, those are the primary features of the sword. It does have a mostly Suguha style hamon, but there are some other details that come through in the polish of the blade. So the opaqueness brings out some of the metallurgical characteristics in the sword. You can make out little banding effects, I think is what they're called, in the surface of the steel. It might make you think that the sword is folded. It is not. It's a kind of mono steel SKS3, which I think predominantly what Evolution Blades uses now. But you can see some of those metallurgical details in the surface of the steel. I'm glad that that's there, and I'm glad that they didn't go further with the polish. Now, I say that because further would cost more money, and if these swords are primarily intended for use, people are buying them with the intention of cutting tatami mats with them. Well, they're going to get stained, they're going to get scuffed, you're going to lose some of that over time, and if you spend a bunch of money on a polish on a mono steel blade, it doesn't necessarily seem like it would be worth it. Here, I can make out clearly where the hamon is. It stands out reasonably well, though I could use it being a little zazzier. And the metallurgical effects on the surface of the steel are brought out. It gives somebody something to appreciate as a collector, as a person that might not be cutting with it. And if you are cutting with it, you absolutely can look at it and admire the sword that you have as well, and some of the character in the surface of the steel. It's something that you often see on antique blades. The polish can mean a lot. If you're watching this video, you probably already know that. It often gets overlooked, though, in practitioner pieces that usually get a kind of a mirror polish on it, and that's it. I'm glad that some time is taken to bring out some of the detail here. It provides some more character to the sword that you wouldn't otherwise see. The other bit I can note about the sword is that this bohi doesn't necessarily swell out a lot, but it does have quite a whistle sound. So if I move the sword around, it's really easy for me to hear. I can absolutely tell if I'm doing the technique right. This goes into practicing with it a little bit more, but at the same time, I can tell you that this bohi is absolutely aided in the practice side of things, because it's very, very effective at creating that wind sound. So the next bit that I'm going to talk about is using the sword, and from a user perspective, it is, as you might expect, absolutely excellent. And some of this is going to be reiterating what you've already heard from the bits and bobs and fits and features section, but more or less all of those little nuances that I talked about that I appreciate. The fact that the kashira doesn't hurt the flub of my hand, that the transitions are good and nothing grabs my skin, that the ito is really tight and makes me feel connected to the sword, that I index it really well and know where the edge is, that bohi is made in such a way that it whistles and lets me really kind of feel where I want to put the power in my strike, that I have the dexterity to do that, and I can actually hear it, despite the fact I'm not necessarily the greatest at hearing stuff. The scabbard draws in and out like it's on rails. It fits really tight. It is an absolutely excellent practitioner's tool. It's a joy to train with. I feel privileged that I got to use it for as long as I have, but absolutely a wonderful trainer tool. And it looks beautiful, and if you're making something like this where it's custom and bespoke to you and designed just for you, then I would imagine that adds to it. This one is not designed for me, but hell, it could have. I really like the design on here. I bedazzle it, obviously, with swirly mitsudomes everywhere. But apart from that, this is absolutely within my wheelhouse. I love the O-kissaki. I like the bohi from a training perspective. It certainly helps out in making it audible. Anyway, all of these little things have absolutely added up into making it a very effective tool. And it's also not particularly heavy, though I do want to note, at 2 pounds, roughly 6 ounces, it's on the lighter medium side of sorts, but this one has a kind of substantive feeling in the hand. It feels like it has more authority, perhaps, in weight than it really does. I don't want to confuse you and make it seem like this is clumsy in the hand. I feel like I have point control, but I do feel like I have to get it started, and that it doesn't take a lot of effort to really stop or move around. At the same time, it doesn't feel as light as the weight would suggest that it is. Usually a 2 pound, 6 ounce sword would feel kind of delicate in my hands almost, and this one feels like a substantial sword, and it's neat that I guess it's not. Now, usually folks would go the other way. It's weird when you see a lot of weight that feels light versus a little weight that feels more. At the same time, I think the balance is overall pretty good. This is intended to be a tamashigiri style blade. You don't necessarily want a delicate little feather. Some people do, some people don't. In this particular case, though, I feel like it's well portioned, well balanced. It doesn't hurt to start and stop. It's not hard to train with either, but it does feel like it has more authority in the cut than it should, which I believe is intentional and part of the design. Anyway, from a practitioner standpoint, a joy in all regards. If you are looking to improve your Japanese-style swordsmanship and want to practice with a high-end sword, then Evolution Blades absolutely is hard to beat. Now, I've talked about that they do ito well in the past, but I haven't really remarked on all of these little things together and drawing and sheathing. I compared them to Citadel earlier, and Citadel doesn't necessarily draw and sheath the same way. I haven't had the same experience as a practitioner with the Citadel blades, and so if you're looking for a sword to practice with, I don't know of anyone else that hits every mark like this, like Evolution Blades does. And they certainly charge for it, but at the same time, if you're looking for the goods, they absolutely bring it and deliver in a way that I just don't see other people doing. I see other people offering value and doing nice things. Don't get me wrong. It's not that other people don't go close to the level of tightness or don't perform necessarily in maybe a similar way, but there's always seemingly some concession with one of the other vendors that I work with or that I've gotten a chance to play with. And obviously, you can't have it all. You can't have all the quality at the cheapest price, even if you wait a long time. There are some vendors that do that, but Evolution Blade is one of the few out there that seems to really nail it on the head with all these little nuances in a way that other people don't. Anyway, I'll stop beating that dead horse. It did an excellent job as a training tool. Now I'm going to talk about the cutting side of things, and it's worth noting that I don't have a ton of experience here in cutting. Sword Friend John has cut with it a number of times. I've talked to him about it, but I only really cut one tatami mat with it, which is not as much as I typically do before I do a review on things. But I can tell you that this is a mat slayer, and I had a used Japanese tatami mat that I traded Sword Friend John because mine had been soaked a little longer. This one was tough to cut, one of the harder mats of the evening, and it made short work of them. I couldn't let the sword do the work for me. That's worth calling out. The sword will not just laser beam through things. If you have a particularly hard target or your form is a little bit off, it's not necessarily going to do the work for you, but it is surprisingly resilient. So I saw some bad cuts thrown at it, and the sword is in some precarious positions. It sprung back into shape, and I also had some hard mats to cut myself, and it was really effective at cutting. I was surprised at how easily I was able to do it. If my technique was okay, it did some of the work for me, but if my technique was bad, it wouldn't. And if you just kind of slap the mat, it's not going to go through it. Again, it's not doing the work for you, but if you're anywhere near correct, the sword moves in a way that others don't and can make it through targets that others might struggle with. The geometry is excellent, the sharpness is excellent, the shape is excellent. It's all a really effective tatami cutter. Now, if you're not looking for tatami cutter, I can't really tell you. I can tell you that on my other Motohara LMC, it's not super durable if you're trying to cut water bottles, but the gear for this sword is cutting tatami mats. It does it effectively. It seems to hold an edge reasonably well. It seems to be durable enough to survive bad cuts even on some of the more resilient tatami mats. But it doesn't seem like it's made for cutting crowbars in my backyard, so that's not what I'm going to do with it. Sword Friend John would like it back in one piece as well. So, and I want to be a good dojo mate. So I only took it to the one tatami mat. I don't have any other targets to cut with them at the moment. My tatami mats are frozen, so that is as much cutting, unfortunately, as I'm going to get with this sword at this time. Such as it is, though, it was an excellent experience in cutting. The last bit that I'm going to do here is just talk a little bit about my experience with my Evolution blades. I have an early edition light mat cutter and a Tensho series blade, which are both from Evolution blades, and they have absolutely improved. So I've had those two blades. I've looked at Sword Friend Carlo's. I've seen some other dojo mates' blade, and I've got to spend some actual quality time with this sword here. Evolution blades is really knocking it out of the park. There are little things that they've improved on in terms of shaping, in terms of dimension, and this sword, full of all its custom features, is a testament to some of the capabilities that they have. Well, it's not perfect. I can absolutely see some improvements in the quality of materials that they're using, the casting of some of the Fuchi Koshirae, the shaping of the handles, some of the way the scabbards are laid out. There's just little nuances and evolutions over time that I absolutely can appreciate. The product that you're getting today is certainly better than the product of yesterday. The product of yesterday is no slouch either. I'm still happy with my LMC and my Tensho. Those are two swords that are absolutely excellent. I'm somewhat loath to part with them. This one, though, if somebody wanted to trade me, I wouldn't say no. But at the same time, this is an absolutely excellent sword, and it's nice to see that they didn't kind of rest on their laurels and just say, hey, we're doing enough. They kept pushing it and are still developing and doing something better. So I'm eager to see what the next 5 or 10 years will bring and what evolution will come next. But there absolutely is an improvement that's been noted in some of the comments that I have here. I see it, is the point. All right, sword friends, that's all I can share with you from a debatably useful information perspective. Hopefully, seeing the close-ups of the bits and bobs, fits and features, seeing me cut with it, seeing me use it as a practitioner, compare it to some of the older stuff, gives you an idea of if it's worth your hard-earned money or not, or at least maybe some idea of a project. Anyway, if you want to check out Evolution Blades, the link is in the description down below. But it's time I answer that question myself. Do I personally think it's worth $6,500? The short answer is yes, absolutely, I do. $6,500 is not an insubstantial amount of money. It's a huge amount of money for a sword. At the same time, you get a ton here. There's all the little nips and tucked and bits and bobs and fits and features are all addressed and done really, really well at a high level, and I don't know that anyone else could do it better. Conceivably, you could make a custom project and spend $6,500. You could spend absolutely way more than that too. You could have a great experience, get something potentially better, but you could get something much worse that takes 4 years. This took 6 months, and Sword Friend John and Jason at Evolution Blades were working together. Jason at Evolution Blades was working with him, making sure he got the sword that he wanted, and then at the end advocated to make sure that that sword became a reality. And I know I've been pedantic and talked about the nips and tucks and fits and features and imperfections and all that kind of stuff, but at the same time, I don't know that you could will this sword into existence any better than Evolution Blades did. This is a complicated thing to make, and $6,500 seems like a reasonable price for it if you want it executed at this level. So if you want something like this, that has all of those features attended to the way that Evolution Blades does, then I think it's worth it. And I don't know where else you can get them all in one package. If you, at least not from a one-stop shop, that is. If you don't, though, then absolutely, it seems like a ludicrous amount of money for no reason. If you don't care about the transitions being there, the gliding on rails, or all of this, the seams are good. Like if the human involvement and effort that goes into making those good isn't worth your money, then this is going to seem like a waste of it. So I would say you have to be the right person. If you're a person that studies Japanese swordsmanship, if you want to improve at tamashigiri competitively or not, this is absolutely a wonderful tool, and I absolutely enjoy it and would recommend it if you value what it offers. Anyway, that's all I've got. Special thanks again to Sword Friend John for lending this. It was a joy. I hope you enjoyed the video. Cheers, and thanks for watching.